guys, welcome back to Game of Thrones recap. Today it's just me, Samantha De Leon, joining you. And today we're going to talk about the last week's episode, EastWatch, and how eventful it was. So last week's episode was very, very, very fiery. It was pretty interesting, and I think it's just amazing how every single week they just keep dropping more bombs on us. So this episode starts off and answers our, number one most important question: what happened to Jaime Lannister? And it starts off, and Bronn pulls Jaime out of the water, and they're both alive. They're both unharmed, surprisingly. And Bronn basically just tells him, "Hey, I did that. I pushed you into the water because I'm the only one allowed to kill you." Like, he tells him that, and he tells him, "You owe me a castle. You owe me a house, or you owe me a wife," and everything like that. And he's saying, "You're not dying until you give that to me." And Jaime's not really even listening at this point. He's just in shock still from, the battle that just happened. And he just starts going off about Daenerys' dragons. He's like, "That was just one. She has two more. We cannot win this. I mean, the Dothraki were just slaughtering us and all this stuff." And Bronn's like, "Yeah, I know. We're not going to win this, so you're giving me my castle." And Jaime's still not listening. And he's like, "We need to tell Cersei. Like, I need to go back. I need to tell her, what we're really up against." And so then it goes to Daenerys, who's literally right across this, giant lake from them. And you can see all the smoke and the flames, and Tyrion's walking through, looking at all the damage. He can't really believe that this happened because, he's on Daenerys' side, but, he obviously still has, this sympathy and all this stuff for the Lannisters. He is a Lannister. He grew up with these people. And he's just going through and seeing everything that Daenerys did just with Drogon. And we go to Daenerys, and she's standing there towering above everybody and speaking to a group of prisoners, and Tyrion is by her side with Drogon behind her, being gigantic and fierce and, roaring. And she tells all the prisoners that they have a choice. They can bend the knee and, proclaim her as their new queen and follow her, or they can die. And in this group of prisoners is Samuel Tarly's dad, Randall Tarly, and his brother, Dickon Tarly. And Daenerys sees them, and she calls, Randall out and tells him to step forward, and he just kind of stands there with his face and everything, and she's like, "Are you going to bend the knee?" And he's like, "I already have a queen," talking about Cersei. And, she starts, saying well, your allegiance, or Tyrion starts saying how his allegiances to Cersei, have been quite questionable, considering how, they just betrayed House Tyrell and everything. And Randall just doesn't lighten up. He's like, "I already have a queen. I'm not going to bend the knee to you. No, I'm not doing that." And he basically just kind of roasts Tyrion. He's like, "I am supporting Cersei because she was born here. She's lived here her entire life and everything. And you are supporting a foreign invader with savages behind her back and stuff." And, you can see the look on Tyrion's face, and he takes it and stuff. And, Randall's just, still standing there. He's not going to bend the knee. And so Daenerys is like, "All right, I gave you a choice. Now you're going to die." And Randall's like, "All right." And he steps forward, and Drogon's about to roast him. And then Dickon, who's still in the sea of prisoners, is like, "Wait, if you're going to roast my dad, you're going to roast me too." And you can see Randall's face, and he literally tells him to shut up. And then you see Tyrion, "You are you are the future of your house. If you die, there's no more House Tarly," which is not true, because there's still Samwell, who is still part of the Night's Watch, but, he's still alive. And I know that Samwell does have a sister. But Dickon decides to perish with his father, and you can see the look on Tyrion's face that he's very concerned, because he does try to, tell Daenerys to, take him as prisoners, "Oh, just put him in a few days in a cell. That's all they need. They'll bend the knee for you," and all that stuff. And Daenerys is like, "No, if I do that with them, I'm going to have to do that with everybody. And that's not fair. And I'm giving them a choice. I'm giving them a chance to live or die." And then she says Dracarys, and they both, go up in flames and die instantly. And you can see all the other prisoners at this point, as soon as they see, what happens to Randall and Dickon, they all bend the knee at once. And it's kind of funny. And Then after that, it goes to Dragonstone, and Tyrion is back there with Ferris, and they're talking about how it's kind of a little concerning that Daenerys is not really listening to them. Because, Tyrion's like, I'm the hand, I'm not the brain. Like, I can't tell her what to do. I mean, I can tell her, but I can't make her listen to me. And Varys is like, dude, we have to find another way to get her to listen to us, because we don't want her to end up like her father, who, also burned people with his dragons and stuff. And so Tyrion is just, sitting there, like, you're right, we have to find a way to get Daenerys to, listen to us. And then at this point, Daenerys just flies in with Drogon, and she lands, like, right at Jon Snow's feet, who's just, standing ominously and, like, looking out to the sea or whatnot. And, Drogon is, like, there snarling at him, like, obviously, like, looking like he could kill him at any moment. And Jon just sticks out his hand, and he sticks it out, and, Drogon is sniffing him and all that stuff, and, like, he's terrified. I mean, you could tell the look on Jon's face, like, okay, I'm still kind of scared. And you can see Daenerys, like, what is he doing? And Drogon just lets it happen. He lets Jon touch him. He doesn't, freak out or anything, and this surprises both Jon and Daenerys. And Jon lets out this huge sigh of relief, and it kind of makes everyone wonder, what does that mean? Does it mean that, Jon is one day going to be able to ride these dragons? Because, Daenerys is the only one so far who can ride them. But, Jon doesn't know that he's a Targaryen. Daenerys doesn't know. And it sets up a lot of questions and stuff to focus on in the future. So then Daenerys, hops off Drogon, and they start talking or whatever, and, Jon turns to her and was like, you weren't gone long. And she was like, yeah, I wasn't. I have fewer enemies than, I have fewer enemies now than I did when I left. And Jon's just like, all right. And Daenerys brings up, the thing that Sir Davos said when, him and Jon first arrived at Dragonstone, that he took a knife in the heart for his people. And you could see Jon, like he doesn't really want to talk about it. And Daenerys is like, what, was that a figure of speech or was it real? And you can see Jon, like, he's right as he's about to answer, some Dothraki come up, and they're like, there's this dude who says that he's your friend, we don't know him, like, who is he? And so Daenerys, like, looks, and it's Jorah. And Jorah's come back from the Citadel, and he's healed, and it's kind of emotional. She goes and she sees him, and she gives him a hug, and, he hugs her, and he's like, I'm back, and she's like, did you find a cure? And he's like, I wouldn't be standing here if I didn't. And Daenerys is like, this is, Sir Jorah Mormont, and you can see the look on Jon's face, like, Mormont, oh. And then he's like, I worked with I fought alongside your father. He was a great man and stuff. And I don't know if Jorah really pieces together that, Samwell and Jon could possibly know each other, but he doesn't say anything. He just, lets it slide. He's just, I'm with Daenerys right now. I'm not even going to talk about that. And so after this, they go to the throne room, and or to Daenerys's little throne room thing. And there is a letter from Bran, who earlier in the episode, he's sitting in the Godswoods, and he was actually warging into this raven that was flying over the. He was actually, I lost my train of thought. Oh shit. What was I saying? Okay, I'm retracing my steps. So after that, they go to Daenerys' throne room, and there's a letter from Bran. And Bran, earlier in the episode, was sitting in the Godswood, and he had warged into this raven who was, with all of these other ravens, and they're flying over the army of the dead. He can see all of it, like how big the army has grown and everything. And it's kind of scary. Not kind of scary, it is scary. Seeing how big this army has grown, from the earlier seasons to now. And so you can see the raven that Bran is warged into. And then, you can see the Night King too. They start flying overhead, and the Night King, is just standing there, and then he looks up to the ravens, and then all the ravens disperse, and Bran's like obviously shaken, and he snaps out of it, and he's like, I need to tell everybody that they're coming, because they're marching towards the wall at this moment. So he sends out a raven to everybody. He sends one out to, I'm assuming, everybody in Westeros, and he sends one to Jon. And Jon, is reading this, and, in that letter, Bran is saying, I'm alive, Arya's alive, I'm the three-eyed raven, they're coming. And so at this point, Jon is like telling Daenerys, I need to go back. I need to go back with my people. I need to prepare them and stuff for what's coming, because the long night is coming. And Daenerys is like, you don't have enough men, no offense, but what are you gonna do? And he's like, I need to go back. I can't really lead an army and everything from over here. And so they all basically come to an agreement that they need to put their differences aside, and they need to focus on the bigger threat here, which is, the army of the dead. And Daenerys realizes this too. And she's like, well, maybe we do need to, me and Cersei need to put our differences aside, not worry about the throne for 5 minutes, and, focus on this, because there won't be any kingdom to, really rule over if they don't take care of this problem. So they, sit there, and they're trying to think about, how can we get Cersei to listen to us? How can we get Cersei to, put everything aside, from war, and just to fight, this army that she's never heard of, or, And so they kind of, come up with this idea and this plan that they're going to get a White Walker, and they're going to kill it, and then they're going to bring it to Cersei and show her with her own eyes. And so she can see it with her own eyes that the army of the dead is real. And so Daenerys is like, okay, how we're going to do that? And Jon's like, well, I'm the only one here who's, fought them. I'm the only one here who's killed one and stuff. So I have to go back. And at this point, everyone's kind of looking at him like, you're going to go back. And he's like, yeah, I'm going to go back. And so Jorah's like, you know what, let me go with him. And Daenerys is like, what's wrong with you? And he's like, I wouldn't be here if it weren't, I was healed, let me serve you. You wanted me to go back to get cured so I can serve you. Now I'm cured, let me serve you. And so she's like, all right, I'm going to let you go. And so Jon's going to go. And then Tyrion's like, well, how are we going to get Cersei to listen? And Tyrion's like, well, Cersei only listens to Jaime, but who does Jaime listen to? And he's like, well, maybe Jaime can listen to me. So he's, asking, like, how can I get back into King's Landing? And Sir Davos, who, used to be a smuggler, was like, I can smuggle you into King's Landing. That's not a problem. So Tyrion and Sir Davos leave for King's Landing, and Jon leaves with Jorah, and they head towards EastWatch. And Daenerys and him kind of have like this weird goodbye. She kind of just says like, I've grown used to you and like your counsel and all that stuff. And you can just tell there's like, chemistry and stuff between them, and it's a little weird. And so he leaves, and Tyrion and Sir Davos leave, and they end up in King's Landing. And they're there, and Tyrion is, running around like trying to get to into the castle, and he's like, all right, so you're gonna stay here? And telling Sir Davos, and Sir Davos is like, nah, I'm gonna go to Flea Bottom and take care of, some business. And, Tyrion's really confused. He's like, what are you gonna do in Flea Bottom? And so we follow Sir Davos into Flea Bottom, and we see, he's, kind of, in the poorer parts and stuff, and he goes and he meets up with Gendry, and he's finally back, after 5 seasons, he's gone, and he's just, Sir Davos just walks up to him, and he's like, hey, and Gendry's like, hey, and it's just, I'm kind of a little speechless right now, because I've anticipated it for so long, and just finally seeing him on that screen, like, hey, he's back, I was like, oh my gosh, he's finally back, he's right there. And so he, or Sir Davos is, talking to him, and he's like, all right, I kind of need your help. And Gendry doesn't even, like, listen to him. Like, he doesn't even, listen to what he needs help with. He's like, all right, I'm ready, let's go. And Sir Davos is like, whoa, you're just going to leave? And he's like, yeah, I'm just going to leave, Like, what good, what am I doing here? He's like, I'm helping the Lannisters make weapons. You know, they're the people who killed my dad. You know, like this. You really think this is something I want to do? Like I want to get out there. I want to fight and stuff. And you know, Sir Davos is like, "Bro, are you any good with a sword?" And he's like, "Nah, I'm not really good with swords." And you're like, "Okay, well, obviously, you know, he's not gonna go." And then he's like, "But I'm good with hammers." And then you see this beautiful hammer that he made himself. And it's so badass. It's so cool. And it's really reminiscent of Robert Baratheon, who also wielded a hammer and, you know, fought with it when he was younger. So Gendry, you know, being his bastard son, is kind of, you know, carrying that on. And it's kind of cool to see that, you know, seeing that he has a knack for fighting and stuff. And so then we go to Jaime and Bronn, and Bronn tells, you know, Jaime, like, okay, we're going to be training, you know, and stuff. And they're walking in the catacombs, you know, underneath the castle. And Jaime's like, all right, well, if we're going to be training, why are we here? You know, there's no one around. It's not daylight. You know, it's super dark in here. It's kind of sketchy. And Bronn's like, oh, well, we don't want anybody seeing you, you know, swing a sword because it was just so embarrassing. And then Jaime's just like, all right, whatever. And then he just stops and he sees Tyrion. And Bronn's like, yeah, this is what I wanted to bring you down here for. We're not training, actually. And kind of just leaves. And it's just so, so tense between them. You could just see both of them on their faces, both Tyrion and Jaime, like, kind of just, you know, they're kind of both in shock, like, he's right in front of me. And at this point, Jaime does know that Tyrion did not kill Joffrey. You know, it was widely believed, you know, across the Seven Kingdoms and everything that Tyrion was the one who murdered Joffrey. But we all know that's not true. It was Olenna. It was Littlefinger. So Jaime knows this, and he, you know, was telling Tyrion, like, I told Bronn, if I ever saw you again, I was going to cut you in half. And, you know, Tyrion's like, well, I'm here. And, you know, he's being classic Tyrion, and he's, like, cracking jokes or whatever. And Jaime's like, what do you want? And he's like, honestly, I'm here to suggest a truce. And, you know, Jaime's like, it's a little early for you to be suggesting a truce. You know, like, you guys are winning this. You know that you're gonna win this. And Tyrion tells that to Jaime too. You know, like, you're a military man, you're a soldier. You know that this is, you know, a fight that you can't win. And Jaime knows that. And Tyrion goes, well, yeah, you know, we can win this, but it won't matter if we don't fight, you know, the bigger threat. And so he tells Jaime about, you know, the White Walkers and the army of the dead and stuff. And then it goes to Jaime speaking with Cersei. And she goes to his chambers, and she's sitting there in her chair, you know, like this, you know, sitting so, you know, mysteriously and, you know, with her black dress or whatever. And Jaime's, like, going up to her and is like, we need to talk, because he has so much to tell her. He has to tell her about Daenerys' dragons. He has to tell her about, you know, his meeting with Tyrion and everything. And the first thing Cersei says was, how many men did we lose? And Jaime's just like, oh, well, we're still counting. And she's like, okay. And he tells her, you know, we got slaughtered out there. You know, the Dothraki were killing us for sport. You know, that was just her with one dragon. I can just imagine, you know, like, if what's going to be like, you know, when she brings, like, all three of them. And, you know, he's kind of, like, freaking out. And she's like, all right, well, what are we going to do? And he's like, well, there's really nothing we can do. You know, like, we're going to die and stuff unless, you know, we kind of agree to this truce. And Cersei's like, you know, that probably would be in our best interest to, you know, consider, you know, a little truce and stuff with Daenerys, because, you know, we have to think about our house and our future. And she just does this, and she kind of just leans back and just, you know, slyly rubs her belly. And then Jaime's kind of like, wait a second. And Cersei's just, like, smiling. And, like, everyone, the viewers, is what I mean by everybody, is kind of just freaking out. I'm freaking out because, you know, Cersei's pregnant, supposedly. And that's a very bad thing. And so she's talking about, you know, we need to do what it takes to survive. You know, our house, you know, is the most important thing right now. Our legacy, you know, making sure that we have a future and stuff. And they're kind of optimistic and stuff. And she starts, you know, seeing how, like, you know, she let that meeting with Tyrion happen. And he's like, you knew about it? And she's like, of course I know about it, you know. Like, I know about everything. And then, he's telling her, like it wasn't it wasn't Tyrion who killed Joffrey. It was Olenna. And, she's kind of, like, why would Olenna kill, Joffrey and stuff. And, he goes up and he explains it. He's like, come on, Marjorie, like, if you were her, would you rather have, your daughter marry Tommen or Joffrey? And, she thinks about it and she can, totally see the logic behind it and stuff. And you can see, like she's listening to him and she believes him. And, the first thing she says is, she was like, I should have not listened to you. I should have let Olenna die in the most horrible way possible because, Jaime was the one who convinced her to let her die peacefully. And they just both kind of just, put it past them. And they're like, all right, we're going to focus on the future. And they're hugging. And then Cersei just whispers in Jaime's ear, do not ever betray me again. And Jaime's just like, okay. And so after this, we go back to Tyrion and Sir Davos, and they meet up, and it's Sir Davos and Gendry, actually, and they're, at the little boat. They're about to take off again, and then we have two Kingsguard. They come down, and they see them, and they're like, what are you doing out here? It's kind of sketchy, just two guys on a small little boat. You have any weapons? What are you planning on doing? And, you can see Gendry's face because the hammer that he has is in the boat. And Sir Davos is like, oh, let me show you what's in the boat. And Gendry's like, what are you doing? My hammer's right there. And he's so smart, Sir Davos. He, is bringing them over, and he's just, flips over the sheet and covers up the hammer, and it's just fermented crab. And he's like, oh, we're gonna sail. I'm gonna make money off of this, selling this to brothels, because this keeps men going. And so he's talking it up, being the Sir Davos that we all know and love, being super charismatic, all this stuff. And they're believing him and everything. And so they're getting away with it, leaving and stuff. And the Kingsguard are leaving, and as soon as they're leaving, Tyrion is coming back, and they see him. And they're like, that's a dwarf with a giant scar on his face. And, as you recall, back when, Joffrey died and stuff, Cersei made all of the, the Kingsguard look for Tyrion. She said, you need to find a dwarf with a giant scar on his face. And so the Kingsguard are like, that's a dwarf with a giant scar on his face. And so they're like, who are you? And he's like, and Tyrion's like, oh, no one, I'm not anything. And then, they start asking more questions, and then Gendry just, gets his hammer and just kills both of them, just swings them in the face, and then they just both take off. And they're headed back to Dragonstone, and then from there, Gendry takes off with Jon, and then we go to Winterfell. And you have a lot of conflict with Sansa and Arya still. Back before they both left King's Landing, as we remember, they didn't exactly always get along. And that's kind of, coming back here, their differences and stuff. And they're having a little town hall meeting equivalent of it. And, all the other lords and stuff are telling Sansa, Jon's not here. Jon is still out in Dragonstone doing God knows what. But, we didn't pick him to lead. But, we probably shouldn't have. We should have picked you. And, Sansa's just there, letting them talk or whatever. And she's like, guys, Jon's still king of the north. I'm just taking care of it in the meantime. Come on. And she doesn't really do it in a way that really, is going to make sure that they don't say it again. But she just says it come on, guys. You guys are being sweet, but seriously. And Arya can see it, that she's not shutting them down the way that she's supposed to. And so Arya goes to her afterwards, and she's like, I can see you thinking about it, I know that you're thinking about it in the back of your head that, how things could be if you were really the one ruling, ruling Winterfell. And she meets her in her mother and her father's chambers, and she's like, oh, you're staying in mom and dad's room. And Sansa's like, yeah. And Arya's like, And Sansa's like, what? And Arya's like, well, you've always liked, nice things. You've always liked being better than everyone else. And Sansa just really doesn't have anything to say back at this point. And, Arya just starts going off like, I know you want to take over. I know you. I know what you're thinking on stuff. And just seeing the level of intimidation that Arya has from the earlier seasons to now. I mean, she's grown so much in confidence. She's an assassin now. She has nothing to lose. She knows how to defend herself. She's not going to try to kiss up to her sister or anything because, she obviously has this upper hand. So she's telling her sister, how it is and stuff. And Sansa is, listening to everything she's saying. And you can tell that Sansa, probably, thinks that she's right. But, she doesn't say anything to Arya. She's just like, I have work to do. And she just turns around and she walks away. And so Arya, starts following Littlefinger around because, Littlefinger is very, very, very sketchy. And, Littlefinger's doing what he does best, lurking in the shadows, talking to people, and all that stuff. And Arya's following him around. And she eventually, follows him back to his chambers. And he's in his room or whatever, and she's just waiting outside. And she's like, you're right, you know what? I think I just might leave. And then some dude walks up. And Littlefinger opens the door. And he gives him, this small little scroll. And it's from Master Lewin, who, in the earlier seasons, in season 1 and stuff, he was, he kept a lot of detailed documents in Winterfell. And so, the guy, some guard or whatever, comes up to Littlefinger and is like, here's that thing you wanted from Master Lewin, saying it out loud. And Littlefinger's like, Lady Sansa, or Lady Stark, thanks you for your service. And so Arya hears this, and she's like, all right, what's going on here? And so Littlefinger goes in his room, puts it away, and then he leaves. And he locks the door, and he walks away. And Arya, is like, okay, well, I can do 2 things here. I can, just leave, or I can break into his room and see what he was doing. So she breaks into his room, obviously, and, she's looking around, not tearing up everything, but, going through everything, trying to see, what was he talking about? What did he read and stuff? Because she can see that he had this little scroll. And I don't know how, but she's just, she looks at the bed, she sees that it's a little undone on one side, and she just lifts it up, and then in the bed is this small little hole, and in that hole is that scroll. And that just blows my mind, because if I were her, I just would have been looking around and been like, okay, nothing's here, he took it with him, I gotta go. But she knew where to go, she found it. And she opened it up, and it was the exact same scroll, or it was the scroll that Sansa had sent to Robb after their father, or after King Robert had died. And, as you remember, she didn't write that on her own. It was Cersei who told her to write that and basically, fed her word for word what to say. And, when Robb reads it, he knows that this is not Sansa. And it was just her saying that, the Lannisters have been treating me so well, you have nothing to worry about, but Robb should really bend the knee to Joffrey, because father was tied with treason. So, yeah. And that letter basically is what sends, Robb towards, the twins and stuff into the Red Wedding, which kills him, kind of starts all this. But Arya reads it, and, she understands, and she's angry, and she storms out of there. And when she's storming out of there, you see Littlefinger lurking in the shadows. And you kind of know at this point that Littlefinger's setting her up because, he's always one step ahead of everyone. And he's trying to cause, disharmony and stuff with Sansa and Arya and, all of them. I mean, why else would he give Bran, that dagger, and why else would he tell Jon that he has feelings for her and all that stuff? I mean, for him, there's a reason for everything that he does. And so after that, then we go to the Citadel. Citadel, and Samwell's there, and you have all the Maesters and stuff, reading this letter from Bran, and Bran's talking about, the army of the dead and stuff, how they're coming, and Sam is hearing this, and he's like, Brandon Stark, and he turns around and he interrupts him. He's like, that's Brandon Stark, that's Jon Snow's brother, I let him through the wall, all these years ago. And they're like, okay, why does that matter? And he's like, dude, he's seen stuff, So he's trying to tell him, hey, this kid, he's been beyond the wall. I saw him, I let him in You know, I know that this kid is real. Like, I know he's telling the truth. Listen to him. You know, because, you know, Sam is there to, you know, try to find ways to defeat the White Walkers. You know, he's there, you know, to become a maester and all that stuff. And all the maesters and stuff, they just really, really, really aren't worried about it. They're like, well, I mean, yeah, that could be true. Or Bran could be lying, so the Dragon Queen, that's what they call Daenerys, you know, can come in and take King's Landing and so Cersei can send all of her armies, you know, away from the south and up north. And that is a great strategy, but I mean, we all know that that's not actually what they're planning on doing. And you can see Sam at this point, he's just so frustrated, you know. I mean, it's understandable why he's so frustrated. I mean, it's the same reason why Jon and everybody else is just so angry because, you know, they're trying to tell people, you know, like, look, this giant thing is coming, you know, like, we need to, you know, prepare ourselves and fight against this, and no one's really listening to them. So Sam goes back to, you know, his, you know, little apartment, room, whatever, with Gilly and baby Sam. And Gilly's like reading through this book, you know, talking about how this, you know, this guy, this maester, whatever, he documented everything. And she was like, do you know how many steps are in the Red Keep? And she's like, 15,000, whatever. And then, you know, Sam's like, well, yeah, that used to be true, but there's no more, you know, there's no more Sept of Baelor. You know, that's because that's what she was talking about. And she's like, yeah, well. And then she's like, what does annulment mean? And he's like, oh, annulment is, you know, where basically someone, you know, gets, you know, rid of their old wife and stuff. He basically explains to her what annulment is. And then she's reading, and she's like, oh, because, you know, this maester guy gave an annulment to Prince Rhaegar and, you know, and then married him and some other woman in Dorne in secret. And she's saying all of this out loud. She's literally telling, you know, Sam that Jon's parents, Lyanna Stark and Rhaegar Targaryen, were actually married. So he's legitimized. So he actually has a legitimate claim to the throne, you know, a claim that's stronger than Daenerys's. And Sam completely misses it. It just flows past him because he's just so angry. He's so angry at the Citadel and, you know, all the maesters and stuff. It just blows past him. And, you know, I don't blame Gilly because she can't read well. I mean, she said Prince Rhaegar instead of Prince, you know, Rhaegar. And he just gets so angry and he just starts going off or whatever about how awful all the maesters are and they don't listen. And he's like, I'm done with it. So he sneaks into like that secret library that he's not allowed into. He takes all these books, and then him and Gilly and baby Sam, you know, are in this carriage and they're about to leave. And she's like, are you sure you want to do this? And he's like, yeah, I am. And they take off. And he does not realize it, and it just completely baffles my mind. Because, I mean, this just means a lot. I mean, it's really important. So at this point, we don't know whether or not if Bran knows about that, but I mean, he's a three-eyed raven. He knows everything, so I'm assuming he does. But let's hope, because that's something that's really big and, you know, people need to know about. So, yeah. So after that, then they go to EastWatch. And it's Jon, and it's Gendry, and it's Jorah, and stuff. And it's all these people you never ever thought would be together. And they go to the wall, and they meet up with Tormund. And they're like, all right. Tormund's like, all right, what do you want to do? And he's like, honestly, I want to go, you know, beyond the wall. And he's like, you're crazy. And Jon's like, I know I'm crazy, but I have to do this. I have to bring back a body so I can show Cersei, so I can show Daenerys that this is real, because we need to unite these people, you know. And so Tormund is like, do you have the big lady with you? Because, you know, he obviously has this thing going on for Brienne. And they're like, no, we didn't bring Brienne. And he's like, okay. He's like, well, you're not the only one that wants to go, you know, beyond the wall. And he takes them to this cell, and it's the Brotherhood without banners. And so it's Thoros and Beric and the Hound. And they're just sitting there in some cold cell, and, you know, Jon is like, you're the Hound, you know, like he recognizes them. He's like, I saw you once, you know, at Winterfell and stuff. And then Gendry is like, yeah, I recognize all these guys too. You know, they sold me to a red witch because, you know, their god that they believe in or whatever told them to. Like, we cannot trust these guys. You know, like, these guys are horrible. They sold me. Let's not, like, you know, talk with them or hang out with them. And then you know, they're just kind of all, you know, fighting at this point because they all have beef with each other and, you know, and all this stuff. And then, you know, Jorah starts, you know, talking, and then they're like, oh, you're a Mormon? And, you know, Tormund's like, you know, your father, you know, just killed us by the slaughter and all this stuff. And then, you know, the Hound's like, all right, everybody just stop talking. Are we going to go with you or not? Like, just yes or no. And then Jon's like, yeah, you are. And then everyone's like, what are you talking about? Like, you know, they're all like arguing again, like, we can't, you know, work with them and all that stuff. And he's like, look, we're all breathing, so we're on the same side, right? So let's just put this behind us and let's just go beyond the wall. And so they all get together, and you see all of them, you know, like come out, like it's 4 of them go out into the snow, and then, you know, it's like the Hound and Beric and Thoros and stuff. And it's just so weird, again, just seeing this group of people, you know, from the earlier seasons to now. I never ever thought that they would ever meet up. And now they're together, and they're going off into the great, like, you know, beyond, and it's a death sentence essentially. And that's how the episode ends. They go off into the snow, and you know, we're gonna pick up from next week. So thank you so much for watching. I'm so sorry again if this was, you know, really long, and if, you know, I'm stammering and stuff like that. There's just so much to go through. And, you know, Game of Thrones is super, super exciting. So, you know, trying to express, you know, like my feelings and everything for the show and for this episode is really hard. But again, thank you so much for watching. You know, tune in next week. We're going to talk about next week's episode because that looks super, super, super cool. And I'm really excited for it. So that's all. I'm Samantha De Leon. Thank you so much for joining me today. And go Cougs. Bye.